ask to relive the passion of Jesus, to revisit it, to not move so quickly into the celebration of resurrection that we forget the horror and the tragedy and the darkness of the cross and why all of that matters. How we are responsible, how I am responsible. Jesus, how I put you there. My willful rebellion against your way, Lord. Killed the only begotten Son. So thank you, Lord, that you did not hold me, do not hold me, do not hold any of us to account for what we deserve. You don't pour out your wrath like we are deserving of, but you direct your wrath unto your own Son. We don't understand that kind of love. We don't. We were, even in our best days, Lord, our love is still selfish, conditional. And short-sighted. Yours is eternal, without measure. Father, let us be a people of the cross. A people washed in the blood. It's an offensive thing to say in this culture, in this day and age. It's confusing to many. It's morbid to many. But let every part of our person be under the sacrificial death of Jesus Christ. Lord, we love you. Help us to love you more. Help us to understand you more, Lord Jesus. Amen. Amen. Good morning again, King's Church. Palm Sunday. Meg, do you remember this? It was several years ago when we were in Louisiana. We did a Palm Sunday service, and we actually had a, remember that? We had a, kind of, it wasn't a play at all. It was more kind of a reenactment of it that went along with the message. And we, with the kids, we actually had a donkey that came down, leading the way with somebody on the back of it. Yeah, did that once, won't do it again. Hey, so this is for you guys. We've got a bunch of these made up for you for next Sunday. Easter Sunday is coming up a week away. I know, I'm not ready for it. I feel like I need another few weeks, but we're going to be here, and we've got some things out there on the internet. We want you to make sure that you're on Facebook. Connect with that event if you're on Facebook, just so we can use that to share any people coming to. But these, take 3 or 4 or 5 of these on your way out today, because these are for you to hand out to people and invite them to come back next Sunday. We know statistically that Easter is one of 2 Sundays in the year that the unchurched are more likely than ever to come. Curious why that is. You know, there's just something about that. Even the person who doesn't go to church sort of feels drawn. Maybe they feel guilty and they feel like, okay, if I show up on Easter, I've done my due diligence for the year. Who knows? Lots of different reasons. And but whatever. Many of them are open to coming with an invitation. How many of you, if you weren't raised in a church, if you're not from like a cradled Christian kind of thing, you're new to the faith or a relative in your past, came because someone invited you? One, two, a few. Okay, not to King's Church, just in general, you came to God's family because somebody else invited you to come. All right, I would bet most of us, if we're honest, came because somebody invited you. It tends to be the case. You know, if a non-believer is invited, more than likely they're going to say, sure, I'm a little skeptical, but I'll come with you. So invite somebody, bring them along, take them out to lunch afterwards, give them this and say, come be a part of what we're doing here. We're going to have a gift for those that are new, that are coming, so make sure you come along for that as well. I want to go ahead and read some words of knowledge now. I want to do this at the front end, just to kind of let some of these percolate with you. You guys okay with that? And at the end, during our ministry time, we're going to believe that God's going to respond to some of these. So some of these are pretty specific. So here's what we're hearing. Someone that has hearing issues in one or both ears. Having a hard time turning your neck to the right. Another one, I will heal bladder and urinary tract issues. Hard time straightening out the fingers and releasing a miracle, says the Lord. Carpal tunnel syndrome. And arthritis in the knees, particularly the left one. And finally, I'm giving someone a miracle anointing. God's saying that He's offering this congregation various gifts and callings. It's an open offer. You have not because you asked not. When you ask, that you don't believe that I'll give it to you. So the Lord's saying, ask and believe, and He's going to give us some of those things. So I'll do these at the end again, but I want to kind of let that sit with you there a little bit this morning. Okay, gave those words. I talked a little bit about Easter. We're in Luke chapter 15. We're in a series called The Kingdom is Light, looking at the parables of Jesus. And we probably will come back to this because there's so many parables. There's so many things that we just didn't hit on. And we've done 4 of these, and there's just a third of all of Jesus' teachings were done with parables. So probably in the history of our church, we'll kind of, as available as the Lord so promised, we'll jump back in and sort of do this series in one-offs. But this will kind of be the last one for this group. We're in Luke chapter 15. I got to stop talking long enough to find it. I can't do 2 things at once. All right, you guys there? And we got Bibles up here too. Anybody need one? The real thing? All right, they're right up here. Don't be shy. Meg's going to make us hold it up if you got one. All right. Don't say we didn't ask. I'm drinking my coffee because I didn't get it this morning. We're trying to fix our internet issues, and so a little bit behind. So in my family, we've got 4 children. Most of our movie watching involves kid-friendly movies of the G variety, and especially the Pixar movies. We love those. We've loved them from the very beginning because they're so well done, and they're story-driven and character-driven. And I remember one of the first times that we took, probably was, Emma or Josie, to see Finding Nemo. Remember the story of that? And of course, there's been a sequel out recently, but at the time, Finding Nemo was sort of the standalone story, and it really isn't an original storyline. It's all about this idea of lostness. And if anybody not know the story of that, come on, somebody please raise your hand so I can tell it.
I don't know it.
Chuck, you know her? Okay, great. Chuck, this is the best story. It's about a clownfish, right? The family of clownfish, and Nemo is his name, and something terrible happens to Nemo's mom and all of Nemo's little brothers, and all of a sudden it's just Dad and Nemo alone in the reef off of the coast of Africa, right? And something happens along the way, and Nemo kind of disregards what Dad has said is the safe thing to do, and he gets caught by a net and taken, and he's now living in an aquarium in a dentist office in Sydney, Australia. What's the address? Something Wallaby Way, is that it? Sure. 2 Wallaby Way, Sydney. It's awesome. Tell parents here, I got to memorize. And the whole story is about Dad trying to find Nemo. It's about Marlin in a desperate search to go and find his son and bring him home. And he runs into Dory, the fish who doesn't have a long-term memory or whatever, and he's just trying to make his way back. And it was such a popular movie, and it was really resonant with so many people, and maybe many of us didn't realize why. But it's such a human condition, this idea of being found, of being hunted down, of being sought after. And I love to kind of revisit this. It's about someone coming, this idea that someone's coming to find me. And I just my 42 years of life and all the times that I've been ministering to people, that's sort of this recurring inner need that we have, is the need to be sought after, to know that someone desires me, that someone's coming after me, that someone wants relationship with me. So maybe it's a father, maybe it's a spouse, or whatever else. But Jesus has some parables, though, oddly enough. Jesus was the original storyteller of this kind. He talks about this. Talk about this very thing. So in Luke 15, he gives 3 of these lost stories back to back. A lost sheep, a lost coin, and a lost son. We're going to look at these real quickly. They're all meant to be read together, and it really is all the same theme. Let me give you and by the way, the lost son, so lost sheep, lost coin, lost son. The lost son, or you can think of, maybe you've heard it called the prodigal son. This is the longest of Jesus' parables. And there's a law in inductive Bible study called the law of priority, or the law of proportion, which means that the longer something is given, the more space on the parchment, so to speak, that something is given, the more important it is. Because the original writers, they didn't have word processors and computers. They had a set amount of parchment and a set amount of space and a set amount of time. So they weren't going to waste space with superfluous details that really didn't matter. So if something is pretty lengthy in the Gospels, we're meant to say, hey, pay attention to this. It's long, but it's very, very important. And the parable of the lost son is one of those. Let's kind of read a little bit in the beginning of this to set the context. Luke 15, beginning of verse 1. Now the tax collectors and sinners. Does your Bible have sinners in quotes, or is that just my Bible? It's just...
Other notorious sinners.
It's the NIV. It's interesting. The tax collectors and sinners is in quotes. So it's implying that tax collectors are sinners and all these other people are sinners. We're all gathering around to hear him, talking about Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered. I love that word, muttered. Sometimes my kids mutter. You know what that means? It means like, I want to express myself, but I'm not brave enough to say it to your face. Right? Sometimes I mutter. Right, Megan? I grouse and I kind of, mumble under my breath. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Very offended by this.
Amen.
Clearly they have this understanding that people of high standing, religious standing, should not associate with these other kind of people. Should not eat with them, should not be at the table with them. It's sort of guilty by association. So the Pharisees are judging him on this. And it goes in, it says, Jesus told them this parable. And he says this, he says, "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it?" You guys remember my story last fall about the goat that was missing? Didn't I tell that story on Facebook or something? Yes. I don't know. It reminds me of this. We've got goats, and one time one of them went missing and I couldn't find it. So now I'm like, I get what he's talking about. You got to leave these and you got to go because the sun's coming down, and this sheep or this goat or whatever is out here all alone in the elements. And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders. I didn't do that. And goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me. I have found my lost sheep." I did that. Almost took a picture and put it on Instagram. I was so excited about this. Look, I found it. I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Now, hold on. Before we get excited about this, y'all, we're the 99 right here. Is God glad that you're here? Yes. Let me say yes.
Yes.
Does God love you being in the kingdom?
Yes.
He does. You know what God's more excited about? The person that's on the edge that's about to come in. He's more excited about them than he is about you being here. He loves us, don't get us wrong, but that's what really gets him excited. The idea of somebody who is outside now becoming on the inside. And he goes on and says this, so that was the parable of the lost sheep. They understand what that means. The parable of the lost coin. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Does she not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there's rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. So do you see the theme then so far? Two lost things, a lost sheep and a lost coin, and then the one who goes after and finds, and how excited and how he is celebrating. So here's the third one. It begins this way, verse 11. Jesus continued, getting into the longest parable now. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. There's a writer and a scholar, his name is Ken Bailey. He studied, a lot of sort of anthropology, and he studied different cultures in the Middle East. And he says this in reference to this story that we're about to read. He says, I've lived in the Middle East for 40 years. So I've lived there for 4 decades. I've studied all kinds of indigenous cultures in the ancient Near East and the Far East. He says, not one time, says Ken Bailey, have I ever heard of this happening. What he means is that this would be such an offensive thing to say and to do, that this is unfathomable for anybody in this culture. So we got 2 sons here, older son and a younger son. And the younger son comes and says, Dad, I want my share of the estate. Now, there's 3 in my family. I have an older brother, myself, and my little sister Carrie. So when my parents, far in the future, ever go on to glory, and their estate is to be probated and divided up, the general consensus among probably most functional, healthy families is that the children would sort of equally divide that, right? So I would get 1/3 of all my dad's riches. Meg's laughing. My sister would get 1/3, and my brother would get 1/3, and we would equally divide those. Not so in the ancient world. The firstborn son had a double portion. He was entitled to more. The responsibility, the name of the family, the estate of the family would largely go to him. He would get a double portion. So in this case, instead of being divided into 2 ways, it would be divided into 3 ways, and the first son would get 2/3, and this other son would get 1/3. Doesn't really make a difference. What matters is that he comes and he says, Dad, I want my share of the estate. So the Bible says, so he divided his property between them. Now, this is a parable, obviously. It means that there's no evidence that this is a factual story, but we can sort of hypothesize as to what this really means. If you have a lot of land, and your son comes to you and says, Dad, give me my share of the estate, you're going to have to liquidate some of that. It's not going to be, you're not going to go to the bank and say, okay, I'm going to pull out $100,000 and give it to your son. It says he divided the property. In other words, there's a whole lot of stuff that he had to do to make this happen. And maybe he had 100 acres, and he had to go and say, okay, well, I've got to get 33 acres now to give to my son. They can't just give him the physical land. He sells some of that and gives it to his son. And the request is so offensive and so highly unusual. Because in essence, what the younger son is saying is that, Dad, I'm ready for you to be dead. I can't wait for you to live out your remaining years. I'm so greedy and so desperate for all of that I wish you were dead. I want to live my life as if you are in the grave and buried, and that stuff out there is really mine. And it's profoundly offensive. Profoundly offensive in that culture. And it would be in this culture too, in the Middle East. And so, but it says he divides his property between them. He does that. He goes and he sells 33 of the acres. He takes the money and he gives it to his son. And the son says this in verse 14. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, the far country. So he doesn't just go to another town. The implication is that he leaves Israel. He leaves the land of his people. He goes to a land of foreigners and squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Money runs out, and I always imagine, the movies, in the movies where to move the plot along, the movie will kind of have this like quick montage, usually set to a song. You know what I'm talking about? And like the seasons change and the baby grows up, or you know what I'm talking about? Those kind of montages. This is like a montage in my mind. So maybe there's like some kind of great song along with it. But you see the son who's got all the stuff on, got all the great clothes, got a woman on each side, and he's just doing whatever. He's at the casino having a party, and eventually, by the end of the song, his like pockets are empty. The women have abandoned him. He's all alone. He's hungry. The sun's going down. He's saying, "Great, what do I do?" It says that he goes and he hires himself out to somebody else, and this individual says, "Look, I don't know you. You're not from our culture. You're not from our town. You're not from our country. All I really have for you to do is to go out and feed my pigs." And the son does that. Send him into his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. Wow, that's desperation. I've never been tempted to eat the stuff that I feed our animals. But no one gave him anything. That's harsh. Even in the Jewish culture, the Bible makes it clear, God makes it clear in the Old Testament that, look, if there are strangers and foreigners in your land, you are to treat them with hospitality and kindness. He's not receiving the same thing when he's out there. They're not giving him anything. They're not even letting him lick the bowls of the pig slop and everything that's in there. No one gave him anything. Verse 17, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my... Well, let me pause there and stop for a minute. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. So at this point, Jesus' audience has an understanding. They're tracking with him. It's possible they've heard a variation of the story before, but they're tracking with him. The ones who are sort of from the low end of the socioeconomic spectrum, they're sympathizing with this kid, right? They're like, I know what it's like to be hungry. I know what it's like to be like serving and slopping pigs and not have enough to eat. I get all this. But the majority of his listeners are not these. The majority of his listeners are Pharisees. They're the ones who have position, they have power, they have influence, they have money. At this point, they're thinking one thing only. Serves him right, yep. The little wretch. That's right. That's what they're thinking. You get what's coming to you, you little punk. What do you think is going to happen? When you flaunt your father's goodwill, when you offend him, when you wish him dead, when you take from him what isn't even yours, and you go out and you live the way you've been living in a foreign country, of course you're going to end up with the pigs. Serves you right, you little wretch. And it's possible, as I said, it's possible that a story similar to this would have already been making its rounds around before. And it's possible that they think they know how this ends, the Pharisees. There's a good chance, let me tell you this, there's a book by Curtis Leons called The Man with the Dirty Hands, and he says that there was a sort of an ancient legend circulating around in history from Asia that went something like this, and it's the story that I'm about to tell you has kind of been repeated in other cultures. So it's possible that Jesus' listeners were expecting this particular story. You ready? I'll take my glasses off. I want to read it to you. I need bifocals, by the way. This is kind of on and off, on and off. All right. So here's the story of a man who had a wild, impetuous son, according to the man with the dirty hands. It says, this particular boy became involved with the ruffians of the village who persuaded him to join them in the robbery of his own father's treasury house. Ancient Asian legend. After the robbery was over, his friends fled with the stolen treasure and left him to face the guilt of the crime all alone. The young man was desperate. He was deserted by his friends. He had betrayed the trust of his father. But the greatest crime was he had brought public dishonor upon the family name. The young man knew this. And in the culture, this ancient Asian culture where ancestors were worshipped and the family integrity was a sacred trust, this, says Leons, was the greatest crime of all, dishonoring the family name. So the boy is broken and deeply repentant. He goes to his father. He begs forgiveness. Graciously, forgiveness is granted. The father calls all the members of the family together to celebrate the reconciliation and the return of his son were all gathered around at this feast. They had all enjoyed the banquet to the fullest, and the father stood and lifts up a cup of rice wine for a toast. Everybody has one there in front of him. Everybody, he lifts it up and he says, I want to make a toast, and everybody lifts up their glass in return, and the son lifts his up. The son drinks deeply of the contents of his cup. And within a few short seconds, he grabs his throat. His face turns white, and he falls to the ground dead, poisoned because of the contents in the cup. The father, with ceremonial dignity, nods to all of the guests at the table, who in response nod in return. All was now put right. The son had paid the price of his pardon with poison. His honor had been restored. The family integrity, family name had been restored. And the unfortunate incident was closed and promptly forgotten. That's how dishonor is dealt with in many of those cultures. And it's possible that something like this is what the Pharisees were expecting or hoping for. This is the just reward for this offense of the youngest son. In fact, the Jews had something similar, not quite as toxic as this, but they had a ceremony called the kazuzah ceremony. And the kazuzah ceremony was meant to deal with things like this. And there were two ways that a kazuzah could be inflicted or carried out upon a particular Jewish man. The first is if you married a Gentile woman. That was against the law, that was against the culture of the time. If you marry a Gentile woman and you bring disgrace to your family, then we're going to bring this kazuzah ceremony and implement it in front of you. The second, though, is if you lose your land, your property, or your inheritance to the Gentiles. If you squander your land, because all of this land was given by God. Remember, this is the promised land. It's been assigned to each tribe. Each tribe has their own. Each clan has their own part of this. And if you, as a young, impetuous youth, were to take your land and somehow lose that and give it away or squander it and give it to the Gentiles, and that's highly offensive. And the kazuzah would be brought upon you. And what would happen is, first of all, there would be a gauntlet of uncles and brothers and cousins in the town waiting with some sticks and rocks and just whatever else we could grab. Because as soon as you make your way home, you're going to have to come through this gauntlet of your kinsmen who are going to beat the snot out of you. They're not going to kill you, but they're sure going to put the hurt on you. As you make your way in, you're going to see your father there seated at the gates of his father's home. He's going to have a clay pot. He's going to smash it down, shatter it, as a symbolic gesture of what you have done to the family name. And then that son would work as a slave in his father's house until the debt is repaid. That's kazuzah. That's what's expected. That's what's deserved. It says this. He says, when he came to his senses, he says, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, here we go. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. He knows. He knows what he's done is a violation of God's law. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father. Maybe the Pharisees are thinking, okay, this is where it gets good. This is where the sticks come out. This is where the rocks come out. This is where justice is dealt. And the price is paid. Goes on, it says, but while he was still a long way off, y'all say a long way off. That's important. Come on. His father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. I begin to notice that something that the Bible says a lot about Jesus when he's doing ministry is that he was filled with compassion. Jesus, wherever he goes, he looks and he sees, and his heart just like breaks. His heart weeps, and it's just overflowing with love and compassion. And the Father's heart does the same thing. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. What does Jesus want us to see in this? And I think I grew up with the wrong understanding of this parable. I always thought that this was a parable about the son and how if we really are repentant and come back, God will forgive us. Parables, prodigal sons, come on home. You need to come back to the way you were. Leave your wild living and come on back, and God's got a place for you. How many of you sort of grew up thinking that this was it? If you're really sorry, you can come home, right? The problem is, this is really not about repentance. He's really not that repentant. It kind of is, but it's more of like desperation. Like, okay, I'm starving. I'm only sorry because of the situation that I'm in. What do I need to say or do so I can have food in my belly? Maybe it's a reminder of the price of sin. Maybe it's sort of this picture of this is what sin will cost you. Maybe that. Maybe it's a rebuke to the religious elite. I don't know. I think more than anything, I think it's a glimpse into the heart of the Father. I think all of these. This is not about the sheep. This is not about the coin. This is not about the son. It's not. It's about the one who is seeking and finding. Because here's why I'm thinking that. First of all, look at this. Verse 20 says he saw, he had compassion, he ran, he embraced, he kissed. That Greek word, we don't get all like Greeky around here. Sometimes it makes a difference, right? This one makes a difference because in the Greek word, that kiss is not like the southern lady peck on the cheek. You know what I'm saying? Like, you ever kind of, you don't really touch it. This is like to smother with kisses again and again. That's the word. It's like what you do when you've been away from your kids and your heart is just overflowing. You just want to grab them up and like just smother them all over their face until they're giggling and laughing and pushing you away and say, stop, stop, stop. This is what he's doing. This is what the Father is doing. Smothering with kisses again and again. But look at the word run. Again, in the Greek, though, it doesn't just mean it doesn't just mean hurrying. This means to race towards something with urgency, as in an emergency. And for an elder in the ancient Near East to run, he may as well have been naked doing the pole dance. If you're to visit the Middle Eastern today, come on. And you find some traditional villages and some traditional peoples and traditional elders, ask them, will you show me your legs? Nope. They'll show you outside of the village. You don't see them showing their legs. They may as well be naked. You don't see them running. They don't do that. That's undignified to do this. The Bible says that the Father, you ever tried running he's not wearing a dress, by the way, whatever, a robe. But you tried running in one of these things, called running in a dress, you're going to trip and fall. What do you have to do? You got to hike it up. You got to show those skinny white legs. You got to bear it for all the world to see, and you got to take off running. This is undignified. Fathers don't do this. Elders don't do this. But I began to think, why? Why is he running? Is he running just because he's so excited?